Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the last presentation of the day, a presentation confusingly called the opening keynote, whereas actually it's the closing keynote of the day. Every year we try to find a topic, a speaker who brings us something that is happening, that is completely new happening of this year, and that also shows us a little bit where we are going. The conference is called Next for a reason. We look into the future. We're delighted to have Brad Templeton here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He's an entrepreneur, and he's also somebody who's completely into, well, computers and how systems work. He was the founder of Clarinet. He is, at the moment, the director of the Singularity University. He's a consultant to Google's self-driving car, which I'll come back to. He also has been a board member for a long, long time of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and the list goes on. So sometimes when you meet people, you realize, oh my God, for the last 20 years, they were there, and there, and there, and there, and things kept happening. We asked him to come talk about the driverless car because it's such an interesting thing, first of all, but it's also because it shows, you know, the complete intelligence of machines and data, the interactions between hardware, software, and the world. But what we like to do when he finishes his talk is also actually to engage in a little bit of a discussion with you, with the audience, about what it all means. It's the basic question at the end of every day. What does it all mean? But first of all, let's have a warm applause for Brad Templeton.
Guten Abend. Earlier on this evening, we saw the stories of people talking about connected cars and what was going to take place inside people's vehicles. But something much more dramatic is going to happen. Computers are now driving cars, and you're going to see these commercially on the roads within this decade. I want to talk to you about that marriage, what happens when computers and cars get together. And there are 5 big areas of society that I think will be dramatically changed by this. The first and most important, should be enough for everyone, is simply saving lives, and I'm going to give you some astounding numbers about that. But there are also huge consequences towards energy and also to our cities, about parking and the land we use in our cities, the traffic and the congestion that we bear with every day, and then some remarkable consequences as well for retailing and delivery, which come out of vehicles that can operate themselves. But let's begin with saving lives, and why is this possible? Why is this so important? It turns out human beings are pretty bad drivers, and every year they kill over 1.2 million people around the world. 33,000 people killed in the United States, every year 34,000. The third largest cause of years of life lost. Now, in America, where I get most of my statistics, they calculated this worked out to a cost of about $230 billion every year, about 2.5% of the GDP, and expressed in funny American units, which I can translate for you if you like, 8 cents a mile. In an efficient car like a Prius, and in California where I now live, it's legally required to drive a Prius, that's about the same as the cost of benzene, all right? You're paying as much for your cost of accidents as you're paying for your fuel, an astounding number. Now, they also spend 50 billion hours every year doing this. Okay, you're excited, I can tell. 50 billion hours, well, the whole country of the United States works only 240 billion hours in a year. So it's a pretty astounding number. Now, here in Germany, you're doing a little better than the Americans, actually. You got about 65% of the death rate per kilometer that they have, but still 3,400 Germans killed last year in traffic accidents. You had 2.4 million of those accidents, and 377,000 of them injured people. These are huge, staggering numbers. More people killed in American accidents than in all the wars in the history of that country. That's how dramatic it is. So, we also can say that about 40% of those fatalities come from drinking. And robots very rarely drink, which is nice. 80% of those fatalities or the accidents come from just not looking, another thing that robots are pretty good at. Now, this means losing 41 hours a year of our lives to congestion, and our cities have been given over to cars in ways we don't understand. Now, admittedly, the American cities are not poster childs for this. But Los Angeles, for example, more than half of the land in that city belongs to the car. It's driveways and parking lots and garages, all these different things, and roads, of course. 25% of our energy goes to personal transportation, and 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions. The car has taken over our world, and we've become blind to it. My favorite statistic is that as a race, all humans together are driving every year about 1.7 light years. Now, how often do you get to use light years in your work if you're not an astronomer? I think it's pretty amazing. So why is this real now? Why is this thing from science fiction happening? In Silicon Valley, of course, we say there's a tradition of garage innovation finally taking place in garages. But this is not building artificial intelligence that's as smart as a human, as smart as Hal. It's maybe something as smart as a horse, or perhaps even as smart as a bug. But what happened several years ago, 10 years ago, the United States military held a contest to develop this technology. And the first contest was a complete failure. Nobody got more than 7 miles. My friend Anthony entered a motorcycle that he forgot to turn on. But the second contest, 18 months later, had 5 cars complete a course of 250 kilometers through the desert of California. Empty cars, and this is back in 2005. Here's the winning car from Stanford moving down a mountain ravine. Again, this is now a little over 8 years ago. Well, as the Stanford car comes to the finish line, Google got smart and hired the winners of this contest and the winners of the contest after it to build the next generation of vehicle. And so here we see Chris Urmson in that vehicle pushing the button and starting it going down ordinary streets of ordinary towns. And they've taken this vehicle now over 1.1 million kilometers, stopping at lights, making left turns. Google, by the way, has thanked these people for participating in their research. Dealing with the things you see, seeing in 360 degrees, not seeing like a human and not driving like a human, and that makes a big difference. Here we see the vehicle going down the streets of San Francisco and coming up to a traffic light with someone turning left. We see it dealing with things like joggers running in front of stop signs. You see things like going through the toll booths on the Golden Gate Bridge. Fortunately, there's Easy Pass. Going down the whole coast of California and all the streets there. Driving on windy mountain roads that, frankly, have things that scare even ordinary human drivers. The vehicle sees the same day or night, which turns out to be useful in certain situations. And for fun, they took it down, if you've been to San Francisco, Lombard Street. They call it the windiest street in the world. This is sped up a little. I don't recommend Lombard Street at this actual speed. Now, this is what we saw a few years ago. They've done difficult challenges like merging onto the highway. And here's Stanford teaching their car to park in a way I don't also recommend. But this is not just something from the past. You can buy cars today with these features. Cars that park themselves, keep themselves in the lane, keep themselves a distance from the car in front of them, warn you if you're about to hit a pedestrian or if you're about to hit another car, even hit the brakes for you. That's all in the showroom today. And all the car companies have been announcing their products. Audi has been showing this product at CES for the last 2 years. Tesla, now Elon Musk, some of you are familiar with Elon Musk, he has the largest testicles in Silicon Valley. So after Google said they'd have a car out around 2017, Elon said they'd have a Tesla that drives itself in 2016, not that far away. Volvo built this system, which does convoys, so cars can follow other trucks and take your hands off the wheel. They're going to be testing 100 of their cars now in Gothenburg. They've just announced that they're just rolling them out right now. Nissan has a lab in Silicon Valley where they have promised they'll be selling cars in 2020. And Daimler has also said they'll be selling cars in 2020, and they're probably the most advanced of the car companies right now because they took their car for a drive, actually, the original drive of Bertha Benz, they duplicated it. And they have in the 2014 S-Class, which you can buy today, a traffic jam assist that will drive itself as you move through the traffic jam. BMW has also got, you saw some BMW's BMW efforts, but they didn't talk about this project, the Connected Drive Connect, which is probably the second most advanced, BMW, the second most advanced of the car company projects in building a self-driving vehicle. Ford and other American companies have gotten into efforts, and this company from France named Induct has put out this vehicle they call the Navia. This is for sale now, and it does not have a steering wheel. It only runs on campuses. It doesn't go out on public streets, but it's something that can be bought today, and it runs around with pedestrians and bicycles and all those other things safely by going slowly. So this film shows the Google car in action.
Auto driving.
I've trimmed it down for you a bit.
Here we go. Away we go.
This is one of the first civilians to go in the car.
No hands anywhere.
No hands, no feet.
No hands, no feet, no nothing. We're here at the stop sign. Yep. Cars using radars and laser to check and make sure there's nothing coming either way. I find myself looking. Old habits die hard, man. They don't die. Right, well, let's go get a taco at the drive-thru. And we're turning into the parking lot. Go. Now we kind of creep along here. Does anybody have any money?
I've got money.
No, I've got my wallet right here. %95 of my vision is gone. I'm well past legally blind.
So as you saw, Steve, actually let me pause back for a second. Steve, the director of the Santa Clara Valley Blind Center, was one of the first civilians, and he shows you that this vehicle can also, in addition to saving all those lives, open up freedom and mobility to millions of people who have disabilities which stop them from using not just cars, but even public transportation. And this means not just him, by the way, but all of you as you get older. You will not lose the ability to move around as you get older because of this technology. Google recently released some new videos about their project to work in urban streets. Here we see, for example, the car's view of traffic cones on the side of the road being detected and changing lanes because the road has changed from its map, carefully making sure it can. Here it is passing a couple of cyclists, and one of the cyclists puts out his arm to the left to say he wants to move out, so the car yields to him. It's drawing a little fence in front of him as it goes. Then he's a little bit strange, so he changes his mind. I guess he's scared of the robotic car. And then he says, I'm going to change again. And the car handles it. Well, okay, I think that was set up a little bit, but it's the idea of what the system does. So this is not science fiction anymore. That's out here. And so I see it as a way for programmers to change the world in such dramatic ways because of these dramatic numbers. To give you a taste of how it works, on top of the car you saw this spinning sensor. This is a research device. It's expensive today, but will be cheap very soon. And this device spins 10 times every second sending out laser beams. And that's called a LiDAR. It's like a laser radar, and it's able to get a 360-degree, truly 3D picture of the world, not the fake 3D that we get with our own eyes, but a true 3D picture of the world. I showed you a little bit of this before, the lasers drawing circles on the road. You get clouds, and the people from here showed you a similar technology in their talk, allowing the car to see in this very different way. Now, the LiDAR is not alone. Also, there is radar on the vehicle. Radar is not very high resolution, but it tells you how fast things are moving, which is very nice, and it can see further, and it can see through fog and other kinds of bad weather, which is very nice. There is a GPS on the vehicle, but that is not used for driving any more than you would drive by staring at your GPS, which would be a very bad idea. The GPS just tells the car approximately where it is, what street it's on, so that it can do its other techniques to find its exact position. But let's go a little bit more in the future and think about a world where what pulls up to you when you pick up your mobile phone and say, I'm alone or I'm with someone else and I want to go across town, is a vehicle designed for that trip, something that's a pleasant work environment, maybe with a desk or a screen inside, something that has 2 seats or 4 seats face-to-face because you're going to be working with a coworker or you're going to be with your family. And it does it all with no central control and no new infrastructure on the roads that we have now without any necessary change to the roads by the government, which frankly is a little bit slow. This can be sort of a poor man's teleporter. A vehicle that can do this, that can run on its own, has 4 really useful functions. Driving you around is pretty good. I've told you about that. But a vehicle that can do that is also a vehicle that can deliver itself to you. It's a vehicle that can refuel itself or recharge itself. And it's a vehicle that can park or store itself. This has big consequences for our cities and big consequences to energy. Why is that? People go into car dealerships today and they ask one question. That question is, why doesn't my clicker work? There we go. No, the question is actually, what car do I need for my life? They go into the car dealer and they want a multi-purpose car that meets all their needs. If they ski, every so often they want this SUV. If they need to carry cargo twice a year, they buy a pickup truck. They always get at least a 5-passenger sedan I know here in Berlin I've seen a few smarts running around, but most of the cars I've seen are still the big sedans, and that's what people buy. But what if we have this mobility on demand? We change this fundamental question that governs all car buying today, and we change it into, what car do I need today? What car do I need for this trip? And the answer to that question is very, very different, because most trips are alone. Most trips are one person going a short distance across town. And for that, a small, efficient vehicle like the Smart, or this vehicle here that won the X Prize for the most efficient vehicle, these vehicles can carry us for most of our trips, and we can get SUVs for the times we really need them. Well, that's dramatic. It's incredible what that means, because since most trips can go in efficient vehicles, we can drop the amount of energy it takes to do transportation immensely. It's actually greener, not just than today's cars, but than today's transit systems. And I don't just mean the bad American transit systems, I mean the Japanese ones, which are even better than the German ones. That's how green you can make small individual vehicles. And it means, sorry about that, it means a huge change, because it also brings the electric car into reality. Because robots don't care about how convenient it is to recharge or refuel. They don't care about anything. They're robots. They're very good about not caring about things. And that means you don't care about the powertrain in the vehicle you've summoned. They can park anywhere. This allows you to use all the alternative fuels or to use electricity. I've calculated this could mean a tremendous drop in the amount of greenhouse gas emissions we make, and actually it would mean the United States would no longer have to import oil from overseas. You've probably noticed something about the Americans. They have this pesky habit of going to war over the oil they import from overseas. I think it's a very bad habit, and it would be great to break them of it. All right. A hand for no war. That's a pretty easy hand, I got to admit. Rarely do you get a great hand for war. Yeah, war, let's have war. No. Actually, when you do get wars, that's when you do have people saying, I shouldn't say that. So, at first when I started talking about this, my feeling was that this is great, but how will the governments get in the way? And in fact, the reverse has happened. In several states in the United States, California, Nevada, Florida, Washington, D.C., Michigan, they have actually passed laws enabling this technology. This picture has the first autonomous vehicle license plate issued by the state of Nevada. So while this is very promising, there's still some threat of overregulation, but if it happens, there are many countries around the world that want to be the leader in this new automotive technology. They'd love to see the old car companies die and be replaced by their industries. And these countries will do jurisdictional competition. They will, Singapore perhaps, or China, or India, or Israel, all these countries may try and dominate this, and they can adjust their laws to make it happen if the United States or Europe don't do it. And we also have a lot of people lobbying for it. I mean, everyone with children and doesn't want to take their kids to football practice every day will be very interested in this. Drunks are going to love the fact that they can get completely wasted and get taken home by their car. And I like to say that certainly my Jewish friends have convinced me that there's nothing Jews will enjoy more than arguing about whether it's legal to ride in this car on Saturday or not. So, okay, a few Jews in the audience, I can tell. Now, nothing, of course, is perfect. Nothing is beautiful. There are potential downsides. We may find ourselves hardly walking anywhere anymore, and well, we've seen that movie. And we may not do my green vision at all. We might have people who say, why do I want a little tiny smart car? Why don't I have a big motorhome follow me everywhere I go? In fact, why don't I have 6 motorhomes follow me everywhere I go, and then just dock and form a house for me in the parking lot? That would be very handy in case I need to get something from my cabinets. So that's not a very green thing, but it is possible. And I won't pretend that it wasn't the military that started us off on this path. They have an interest for this sort of technology for other purposes, ones which I'm not keen to see produced, but there's no way to stop that from happening. And we may see our cities change in negative ways. Instead of being closer and more easy to access your friends, you may see more sprawl, you may see people tolerating longer trips. And there are issues that everyone asks about bugs and computer intrusion and security. They're real issues that I can't cover in a 25-minute talk. There are also issues for freedom. Can we order this car to do something illegal? Do you remember the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise? Have many of you seen that movie? So that movie pretends to be about psychics predicting crime, but it's really about self-driving cars. And there's this great scene in it where Tom Cruise is in the car driving along, and suddenly his car announces, you have a new destination. The destination is the jail. And that's because they're arresting him. Well, would you want your car to betray you like that and take you to jail if the police tell it to? Well, it made a great scene in the movie, but most people don't want their cars to do that. But the police do want that to happen. And there are things that will get in the way. And let's face it, one of the problems is that there is an element of fear about this. I mean, for some reason or another, people do not like being killed by robots. They would rather be killed by drunks, which is what's happening today. And as a society, we're actually going to have to sit there and choose between this thing we're deathly afraid of, which is being killed by robots, because nothing will be perfect, there will be accidents, and there will be people hurt, and the existing situation where 1.2 million people are dying on the roads every day. And we could easily make the wrong choice, by the way. It's not guaranteed that we will. However, I have hope for it, as long as we keep the profession in the lower left-hand corner. I won't name them. But as long as we keep them a little distance away from things, things may work out all right. Now, what's the cause for my excitement? At Singularity University, we talk about Moore's Law all the time. It's almost our gospel as to how it's changed the world. This is a chance for the computer to become the most important thing in the car, more important than the engine, more important than all these other factors that have been in cars before. And that means that the most important part of the car will be on the Moore's Law curve. Transportation has not been on the Moore's Law curve. Transportation, gets twice as good every 100 years if it's lucky. We're also going to see these things that come from the internet and from our world of technology, competing innovators fighting against the 19th century approaches that transportation used to run on. Now, why is that great? Because these cars are going to be bought by early adopters. Now, early adopters are basically stupid people with too much money, right? They will go out and they'll buy the 5S of something right after they bought the 5, even though they're still under contract. They just do that. But they are great because they buy new technologies and they drive all of the innovative startups that you see out there. A technology that's bought by them versus a technology that's bought by municipal administrators, which lovely people as there are, especially if there are any in the room, they're very lovely, but they're not early adopters. It's not the way their job works. They can't be that. This is a technology that can grow bottom up instead of with central control, and everyone from the internet world knows who wins competitions between bottom-up approaches and central control. So the question that we ask ourselves is this: will this be adopted like the old industrial technologies, even the electric car, which has been around for 100 years? Or will this be adopted like internet and computer technologies like the iPhone? Well, it won't be at either extreme, but my bet is it's going to be surprisingly fast, surprisingly close to the iPhone. Let's touch very briefly on a couple of other big consequences for our cities. I mentioned that these vehicles, if they can move themselves empty, would not technically park. They'd do what's called standing. And if they're taxis, they wouldn't even park at all. They'd go to pick up another passenger. And even if they're yours, they would store themselves very densely. My calculations show we're not going to need all the parking lots we have out there. We're going to be able to repurpose them, change what we do with them, and my little dream is that we'll turn some of the parking lots into parkland. I know that's not going to happen in most cases, but I like to think it's going to happen in some of the cases. And we also have the potential to change the congestion, which is the bane of our lives if we do move in cars, through a bunch of techniques involving this and road metering and so on. I'm going to gloss over this because we're short on time. I want to finally get to one very important function we have in society. Now, in the US and many countries, there is one product which is so important, it's so vital to the economy, that we've decided you must be able to get it, no matter where you are, you must be able to get it in 30 minutes. Now, when we have delivery robots, small robots the size of suitcases which can move themselves and carry things for very, very low prices, pennies per kilometer, less than pennies per kilometer, it becomes possible to get anything in 30 minutes, not just a pizza, not just fast food. So think about a world, what is retailing like, what is manufacturing like, what is ownership even like when everything can be had cheaply at very quickly, no matter where you are in the world. Everything you can buy from Amazon in your hands, and not at your door, but in your hands where you are now within 30 minutes. This is possible. So, I think it's time, and it's already underway, for an Apollo-like reserve that we should commit ourselves before this decade is out for a computer driving a man to lunch at noon and returning him safely to work. Okay. I guess I should have realized you're kind of big on Kennedy here in Berlin, aren't you, right? He was pretty good here, and he didn't say he was a donut. Everyone knows that he didn't say he was a donut. This resolve, Kennedy also said something great, which is that some problems are worth doing not just because they're easy, but because they're hard. This is one of those hard problems that has become tractable because of the progress of our sensors and our computing, and is going to happen within this decade. You're going to see them on the road. If you live where I live, you see them on the road every day, and the changes are going to be dramatic. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And for once, we have time for questions.
That was our goal, because this topic always engenders a lot of questions. But as Monique said, I have many other hats that I wear at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, where I was chairman for 10 years, and enjoying the results of Mr. Snowden that we heard a little bit earlier on, and you name it. So let's get into some debate. Monique, do you want to have something yourself?
I have 1 million questions. People that have questions, could you stand up, and there's a micro coming, if I'm correct? Where's the micro? Okay, if not, shout. I'm going to do one first, because that's the thing I've been thinking about since I first saw you talking about this whole topic. Now, the car has this thing with LiDAR lasers on it. So you imagine a future with, a city has 1 million cars with 1 million of these LiDAR laser things, and all this information is stored by Google. I mean, there seems to be a sort of a dramatic, we already have everything that we could think of stored, and there's even more. There's every movement in the whole city, because these lasers go everywhere.
Yeah, so don't say you, because I was just an advisor to Google. I'm definitely not speaking on their behalf here. But yes, now on the plus side of that, actually the resolution of the laser is quite small. You may have seen the videos I saw. The people just look like blobs, and you wouldn't identify people from the laser. Now, there's a camera, too.
But you can combine it with lots
That's
of
right.
other stuff, right? I mean...
Yeah, no, it's a really serious concern, and I think it's important that we actually work to architect our systems to protect our privacy. For example, today we have a system of taxi travel that's pretty much anonymous. You can hand cash to a taxi and move from place to place, and our phones have already taken that away from us to some degree. The NSA has, for example, been tapping into the location records of all the phone companies around the world, tracking who travels together, and so that fight is already pitched.
And all the navigation system have everybody tracked, and we're...
So I've written proposals for how to design anonymous taxi systems with this technology, but it's a large slog to make those actually get implemented, and I wish to have some influence on that if I can.
Let's come back to that, but first questions from the audience. Somebody here wanted to ask. Yes, please.
In a lot of the articles I read about self-driving cars, it's still like, oh, we're going to own them, but why doesn't it make completely no sense to own a self-driving car? Because I think the biggest promise is that it maximizes utility of a car, like 100% uses almost.
So I'll just repeat the question for those in the back. Does it make sense to own a self-driving car, or is it the future one of,
So, no, I think that there's no one answer to that question. And so some people who hear about this say, you're right, no one's going to own a car. I will just pick up my phone. I'll just get from place to place. It's going to be wonderful. I don't need to worry about anything. Definitely you'll see a large component of society choose that. But you'll also see people who say, you can take my car from my cold, dead hands, and they're going to want to. And that's fine, because there's no requirement it be either way or the other. People who wish to own and can afford to own will own it. One new option that will be available to them is they'll be able to contract with a taxi company and say, when my car is not doing work for me, I'm going to be at the office for 8 hours, hire yourself out and make me a little bit of money. I can own a slightly nicer car. I can keep my stuff in the car. If I do that, I'd probably have a locker, but I could keep my stuff. If you've seen my car, I've got quite a bit of stuff in it, and so I know why I might want that. People in rural areas won't be able to summon a hired taxi as quickly as people in urban areas, so they're more likely to wish to own. Rich people are likely to wish to own because they're rich and they can. So you'll get a mixture of things. Absolutely. Did we have some other issues?
Yes, please.
How do you convince car owners who appreciate the sportive side of the car, like BMW or Porsche, who don't want to have a rational, nice, convenient car, but have the feeling of speeding with the car?
You're talking to an unnamed car company whose slogan is "Joy of Driving," perhaps, or "Joy," or however they've reduced it to. Of course, but my feeling is I don't get a great deal of joy of driving from my commute or my drives along very long straight roads. So I'd be very happy to have my car take me to the mountains and then take the wheel when I'm going to go and drive in some interesting situation. And so I don't think the steering wheel will disappear from many people's cars for quite some time to come, and they'll be able to do that. You might say, I'm not sure I trust them to do that anymore if they're not getting the practice, so that's an interesting point. But the truth is, I've looked around, and people say that they believe this, but they don't actually mean it. If you grew up in the United States in Pasadena, California, and you never saw a bus in your life because you've had this car culture, and you move to Manhattan or a European city, how long does it take you to switch from car ownership to the taxi system and the transit system? It takes about 15 minutes. You just do it because it's the way things are. I think people are much more pragmatic, and given the choice to get their work done or watch their videos when the driving is boring, I really think most people will take that choice.
There's a question over there, at the right.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. Sorry to bring this up, but if and when there will be an accident caused by an autonomous vehicle, who should be responsible and what should be the appropriate punishment, if any?
Yeah. So since I live in the United States these days, the answer is easy. Everyone will be sued. And in fact, it turns out the question is less interesting than you imagine, because today, when there is a car accident, there are two ways in which the person pays for it. I'm talking about just the financial responsibility. And one is that you are the driver at fault and your insurance company pays for the claims, and then everyone who buys insurance pays a little bit for their premiums. And so the cost of those accidents is shared among all of us. The other way is the car could be responsible. It could have a fault, a bad joint or something, and the car company pays the claims, and then they raise the price of every car, and all of us share the cost of the accident. So no matter what today, accidents are paid for by us, the drivers and owners of cars, and that's not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is who the money flows through. So lawyers are very excited about arguing about who the money should flow through, and should it not be my clients, and should it be me? But for society, it's not actually an interesting question at all. Because what's important is if the cost of accidents stays the same, if we think that we're going to assign a cost similar to if a negligent human had caused the accident, well, and we bring the number of accidents down, then everyone is saving money because we're all sharing that cost, and it's a win for everyone. And I hope that we see that as so clearly rational that we won't fight it, but again, I know the lawyers will try and do something. So I have a longer article on this question on my website, robocars.com/accident.html, if you can remember that, because there are some nuances definitely to this. Now, if you want to talk about criminal liability, that's fairly rare in car accidents, and I have some discussion of that. But here's an important thing to realize. The car accident is the most common tort in the world. Tort is a type of lawsuit. It is literally adjudicated in some way or another hundreds of millions of times a day around the world. There's nothing we know more about than studying responsibility and cost of car accidents, so it's not nearly as mysterious as people imagine.
Let's take another question.
Have we got one more?
Yeah,
way at the back.
There's one over there, and there's one over here. Let's take that one first, because he has
a microphone, that's even better.
And then one over there. Yes, please. Go ahead.
I got a question because there's a lot of emotions around owning a car and having a car, and especially I think in Europe. But there are industries that really are less emotional about this, which is all the delivery services like DHL, FedEx, UPS. I would assume that that would be something that could be disrupted quite fast. I would be interested in your views on that.
Yes, I think delivery is very interesting for quick disruption. The one problem is that in order to develop and test this, we tend to be testing vehicles that are small cars. You know that there are going to be accidents. No one is perfect. So you'd rather have the accident be in a Prius than in a big truck. So in terms of what you want to do. But secondly, and this is an even more important question, most of the robots that I see developed in the world, the industrial robots, typically the company making them says, look, you can buy this and replace workers on your assembly line. It's very overt that it's there to replace tasks that humans were doing before. But most of the driving in the world is done by amateurs, right? It's not done professionally. And so the people building this technology are more interested in what they can do for saving lives and convenience than in replacing human labor and jobs and causing unemployment. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm not saying that if a career in driving could be a bad choice right now, if that's what you're thinking about. But that's not the goal behind most of the projects, is to be disruptive from an employment standpoint. So I feel a little better about that.
Question right over there. Yes, please.
Hi. I just talk? Is that her? Okay. Maybe this question is inappropriate, but if it is, just say so. You know, this is like this new movie now, Transcendence, and the movie She. I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about like what you do at Singularity University.
All right. All I've read about Transcendence is it's terrible, so I don't go to terrible movies. Her is a better movie, absolutely. So Singularity University, in spite of the name, is not really about the singularity, and it's not actually a university, but it's a great place. And that's kind of our unofficial slogan, which is to say that Ray Kurzweil has, and several other writers have written books about this concept of artificial intelligence getting so advanced that it's able to improve itself and exceed human capability. And that's a very interesting concept, and I'm quite interested in it. But at Singularity University, we don't actually spend our time on that concept. We're more interested in all the lead-up, as you might call it, all of the things that are happening at an accelerating pace, technology that's changing so fast that people are having trouble understanding exactly what it means. That's our focus, trying to understand that and trying to teach courses about this. So what I've told you about today is stuff that's already on the roads, and it's going to be changing your lives this decade. Things like AI that becomes smarter than a human being, I sure hope that's not happening this decade. That would be quite shocking if it were. So.
What else is happening in this decade? You study the range of topics.
Yeah, in every field, amazing things. In biotechnology, it's going to be possible to sequence a human genome for less than $1. Some people even think that by 2020 it'll be less than the flush of a toilet. And so your toilet will actually look at all the DNA you've got every time. So we're going to see immense strides in our understanding of the human body and health and medicine and so on. Artificial intelligence, while not able to make you fall in love with it by 2020, it's still going to do some pretty remarkable things. You've all seen perhaps the Watson computer that IBM built that was able to beat the best human champions at the quiz show in the United States called Jeopardy. If you haven't seen that video, you should be able to find it online. We're starting to see humans do more, or computers, sorry, do more and more of those things that we thought were exclusively the province of people, including driving cars, of course, and answering questions and so on. That's being applied to medicine. It's now been, in fact, shown that these medical systems are approaching being more accurate than doctors. That's because doctors are unfortunately less accurate than they try and pretend they are to us. The X Prize Foundation, which did the Space X Prize, now has a contest for a company to build a handheld sensor, something similar to a phone, which can diagnose people better than a group of 10 doctors. And many people think this contest will indeed be won in the next few years. So pretty remarkable stuff. In the law and privacy, I actually say scary things mostly. I warn people. I'll give you something dark to leave the day with.
Exactly.
Which is the threat of time-traveling robots from the future. Now, I usually put up a picture of the former governor of California, who I guess some of you know here because he's Austrian. But he's not the type of time-traveling robot from the future I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that the AI that I've just described is not very good today. It cannot, for example, do face recognition, just take a random photo of anyone in the world and tell you who it is. That's just not something we can do today. But that's not permanently true. We will be able to do that in some years from now. We will have AI that's able to understand speech very well, understand the speaker and see the gait of people. And unfortunately, what we are very good at, really very good at, is recording data. And so we're recording everything that goes by those cameras you see. You know, London, the city of London, Jerusalem, many cities around the world are filled with surveillance cameras, and every ATM machine is recording video of everyone that went by, and every shop is recording it. Well, those records today are going to be kept. And 10 years from now, the AI is going to be able to look back and see actually everywhere you went today and everywhere you went for your whole life and know all that about you if we don't do something to stop it, and it's pretty challenging. So unfortunately, when you worry about the combination of civil rights and privacy and so on with worrying about what technology is going to do in the future, it looks a little grim. There are some bright lights, but that's too dark to end on. Give me one other quick question before we...
Okay, well, one last question. I actually know who will love the driverless car. Anybody under 18, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. You know, freedom for children.
Yeah, you don't have a license, you can drive. Last question. Who dares?
Maybe me? Hi.
Yes.
There's a lot of discussion about the technology you need for the autonomous car. If it's really self-driving or if you need a lot of infrastructure, cloud connectivity and whatever. What do you expect? How much infrastructure do we need to establish autonomous driving? And will we see new giant companies or the comeback of MNOs, or who will do this game?
So my answer as to how much infrastructure we need is, I believe, zero. Zero additional infrastructure. The cars do like to talk to the network. They use the mobile data network, the same one that your phone uses, to get occasional updates to their map data and traffic information and so on as you use it. But this was the great revelation about the military contest I showed you the video of, which was that these were small teams from universities and small groups, just not even big companies. A few big companies entered, and they were told, you're just going to be told a route and you have to drive it. You had no opportunity whatsoever to change the road underneath you. And this caused an epiphany. Because in the past, everyone had thought as you said. Everyone said, we're going to have to build a smart road and have the smart car go on it. But the reverse became true. The rule was, you've got to drive on the road you're given. And they rose to the challenge, and they made a vehicle that could drive on the road they were given. And the remarkable conclusion was, we don't have to change the infrastructure at all. In fact, you don't want to. Because if you change the infrastructure, that means you can only drive where you've got new infrastructure. And that takes decades and decades to get applied everywhere. You want a vehicle that can go everywhere, that you can at least configure it for maps in on day one. And so that's what drove those teams, and that's what drove Google. This is an interesting concept, by the way, that I think is one of the most important lessons that the internet itself taught us. In the 1980s, I'm old, in the 1980s, the phone companies were selling something called the intelligent network. How many of you heard that phrase? A few of you ran into it. And this was a network where if you wanted to buy call waiting, you could go to the phone company and buy it, and they would make your existing phone give you call waiting or call forwarding. You didn't change your phone. And people on the internet came up with a phrase to counter that. They called it the stupid network. And the idea was that the design of the internet is really, really simple. And it's the same design that we had in 1980. In fact, on May 10th, just several days from now, we are going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the TCP/IP protocol, almost the exact identical protocol to what you do everything you see on the internet through. 40 years ago, we designed that. And the greatest period of innovation in the history of the whole human race, I would say, has taken place on board that simple platform. Because the rule was, you keep the network stupid and you make the edge smart. You make the phone smart, you make the web server smart, you make the PC smart. And by doing that, they allowed people in their mother's basements and students at universities to come up with Google and Facebook and all these other things. For two guys in Estonia to come up with Skype and become the world's biggest long-distance phone company without getting anyone's permission. Well, I see that happening in two things right now. I see it happening in the self-driving car, where the car is smart and the road is stupid, and the innovation pace is the pace of individual companies. And I also see it in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin also gives you a money system where the basic system is it's not as stupid as the internet is, but the innovation takes place at the edges and no one needs permission. Look for that. Look for places where there's a simple central concept, where people can innovate without getting permission. That's where you see revolutions, and that's where I see those happening. That's a nicer note to end on.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Brett Templeton.